Don't worry. Ambassador, be ready that the question will be very, very pointed. They have read the newspaper today, so you know what they're going to ask you. Not private, not private. I wonder if you were late because they had closed the door of your embassy.
What happened?
No, well, I mean, if they closed the door of your embassy. Scusate, potete rientrare per favore? Can you come in, please? Well, I wanted to thank Ambassador Kicker to be here, even though the traffic of Rome was really a big obstacle. He was very kind to arrive on time, and I will pass now the floor to one of your colleagues that will introduce the ambassador, and then he will have his time for his presentation, and you will have your time for the questions. Thank you. Prego.
Okay. Hello guys. Today we have the honor to host Jan Kiket, the Austrian ambassador in Italy. He was born in Bangkok, Thailand, but he eventually studied at the Diplomatic Academy of Vienna. He has been the Austrian permanent representative to the United Nations, and we're very glad to have him here today. Herzlich willkommen, Herr Botschafter.
Very many thanks. Happy to be back again this year at the festival, and this is specific format, which is a question time. So I would not want to talk too long, but leave you the opportunity to ask me all sorts of questions, whatever you wanted to know about what a diplomat does to topics of your interest. I've been quite a while in the diplomatic service of Austria, did very various functions, very interesting ones, starting also in my neighborhood, the neighbors of Austria, but also in the Balkans, where I had the opportunity and the fortune to be what I dub a laptop diplomat. So not one of the diplomats who sit in a nice embassy and write their reports, but I was really on the field. That was in Kosovo. And then I had the fortune, as the introducer told you, that I was able to do various things like multilateral diplomacy, working at the UN, as much as bilateral diplomacy, which I'm doing now in Italy. I'm the ambassador only to Italy, which is, why do I say that? Because many of my colleagues are co-accredited to San Marino, Malta, or even more countries, or accredited also to the UN organizations here in Rome, which I'm not. But I was 5 years in New York at the UN there, so I'm very much also a multilateral person. Maybe I try to introduce you a bit to Austria. Those who are from Italy probably know a bit more about it, but we're a small country in international standards. We are featuring in the UN in a group, a very loose group of the Forum of Small States. And yet, on the European level, my government insists we're a middle country. We're not the smallest of the EU member states, but we are certainly not one of the big ones. You might know Austria a bit as a tourist destination, skiing and all that, but you would probably not know that Austria is a very industrial country, industrialized, a country which is very much dependent on being an open economy, an open society. About 60% of our GDP is being earned through exports. So we're very much interested in having the opportunity to trade because we're dependent at it. Austria currently is certainly among the richest countries in the world. It was not always like this. Many an Alpine country were dead poor. Remember the Swiss guards? The second sons were given away to the Pope to guard him because there was just no living in the Alpine areas. This has changed drastically. We are a net contributor to the EU budget. So we are also in this respect showing how fortunate we are in our current situation. Maybe just a little bit to understand also foreign policy of history, in the sense that after the Second World War, Austria, having been part of the Nazi Third Reich, was also occupied by four states, four countries, and partitioned like Germany was. We were just fortunate enough that in 1955 we could conclude a state treaty with the four powers, meaning the United States, the Soviet Union, France, and the United Kingdom, that gave us back our full sovereignty. And to my knowledge, we're the only country where the Red Army retreated by itself. So else we would have, so we were spared by a historical coincidence of this experience of Germany of being a partitioned country. We were also fortunate enough to having been spared of the yoke of communism, like many of our Central European neighbors. And in the annus mirabilis of 1989, when the Iron Curtain fell, we got back our neighborhood, which was really, when I grew up, it was a dead border. You have to imagine that 50 kilometers to the east, there was Slovakia, the capital, Bratislava. And it was not something we could go and travel easily as we do today because of the Iron Curtain and the communist bloc. A part of the 1955 trade-off, if you like, to get our state treaty was that we, in 1955, declared our permanent neutrality, according to the Swiss model, as it was said at the time. This was a deal with the Soviet Union, which was afraid that Austria, or the west of Austria, like the west of Germany, could become a member of NATO. You have to imagine also, if you try to locate Europe, it was in the interest of the Soviet Union to have a neutral wedge into the NATO area. Western Germany being part of NATO since 49, and then Italy in the south. And together with Switzerland, that was a perfect a neutral wedge into the NATO territory. So that was what we politically were giving in exchange for our full sovereignty and territorial integrity in 1955 to the Soviet Union. But we never understood it ourselves as politically neutral. And it was already a year after our state treaty in 56, with the uprising in Hungary and with the hundreds of thousands of refugees who came to Austria or went through Austria to other destinations, that we demonstrated that we're clearly anchored in the West, not in the East, politically speaking. Geographically, Prague is much more to the West than Vienna is, but politically speaking. And we also proved that also in 1968 with the Czechoslovak Spring, the uprising there, which was also turned off by the Red Army intervention. And it culminated in our membership of the European Union. It was not a given because there again, the Soviet Union was not in favor of us joining the European Union, but lucky enough, since the collapse of the Soviet Union, the way opened for us in Austria to apply for the European Union. Before we were members of the European Free Trade area and so on. So this is a second class and second a grouping which had also for a while the UK before it entered the EU, and still has countries like Norway, Switzerland, Liechtenstein. So just that you know which company economy that was. So we entered the European Union in 1995. Ever since, the European Union is, of course, like for every EU member, a framework for its foreign policy and diplomacy. And of course, for us, the best thing which could happen was then the EU enlargement in 2004. Then, of course, the successive enlargements with Bulgaria, Romania, and in the end also Croatia. So that we really now, Austria is in the center of the European Union, embedded, if you like, in a community of like-minded, and we profited a lot from being from a peripheral situation, which we had when the Iron Curtain still existed, to now being the center. Also economically, our companies were among the first who invested in the neighboring countries. We are in many neighboring countries, number 1, 2, 3, 4 investor, and also in the Balkans. This is also something where we're very much engaged, Austria, because we believe firmly that the enlargement, the construction of the European Union has not ended, that we need new members, that the Western Balkans in particular, for a multitude of reasons, should be members of the European Union. You would find Austria as a strong advocate in this sense. Of course, now with the added aspect of Ukraine and Moldova being admitted as candidate countries, but we believe that this should go hand in hand, that there should be no two classes of EU aspirants. So we really believe that we need a European Union of up to 35. So that would be the, if you like, the unification or reunification of Europe to be fulfilled. Of course, it also needs a deepening of the European Union, and we can discuss that also, where Austria stands at this point. Yeah, I would leave it here and let your questions guide the discussion in every direction you would be interested in.
Can you hear me? Okay. Hello, Ambassador. It's an honor to make your acquaintance. I'm Matteo Mazzantini. I'm a Jiu-Jitsu student from Italy. And my question is regarding some current happenings. I wanted to ask what is Austria's current position regarding its participation in the Schengen area? And could you please elaborate on any specific limitation or restriction on the movement of peoples and goods and the impact that those changes could have on the economy of Austria and Europe?
What we have seen in the past couple of years is a undermining of Schengen, with introduction of border controls all over. We, Austria, until recently had border controls to Hungary and Slovenia, because this is where the migration routes were running. The so-called Western Balkans route, one of the 3 main migration routes to Europe. We didn't make friends, especially our Slovene neighbors were very upset with us. But we always pointed out, okay, why do we do this? Because the Germans are doing it even longer with us. The Danes are doing it with the Germans. So what we do see the last couple of years is that Schengen as such doesn't work anymore. You've seen now the recent decision of Italy to introduce border controls towards Slovenia. What was the Slovene reaction? It introduced border controls towards Croatia, because nobody wants to end up as the country where migrants will end up and are caught. So what we have is a cascading, and as long as we do not solve the external dimension of migration, we will not have a functioning Schengen system. probably one of the future questions would have been, why is Austria blocking the Schengen membership of Bulgaria and Romania? It is exactly because of this issue that Schengen is not working. And we have to help, in this case, especially Bulgaria, to observe and control its outer, which is the outer EU border, more, so that the flow of irregular migrants is being managed to a degree where we can, let's say, digest it, not necessarily materially, but I would say mentally. To give you a background, last year we had in Austria 112,000 asylum seekers. This is in absolute numbers more than arrivals of irregular migrants in Italy in 2022. So a country of 9 million people had more influx than a country of 59 million people. So there was an urgent need to address that, and therefore my government took also this decision of temporarily, for the time being, blocking the membership of Romania and Bulgaria, where we also have, it's not against these two countries, but it's to put pressure on us collectively in the European Union to do something. Will it infringe the free movement of labor and goods? I don't think so. You can handle it well. Germany, who introduced border controls to Austria, I don't know, 6-7 years ago, is our biggest bilateral trading partner. The flow of goods are unhindered. Italy is our second most important trading partner. So I don't see, and we don't have any direct, no controls at the border points between Italy and Austria. Also because of political reasons, general bilateral relations, but also the specific issue of Südtirol, Alto Adige, which would be hampered if there would be border controls on the Brenner.
Hi, I'm Alessandro Bevilacqua, GGC student from Italy, and I'm happy you came here to answer our questions. And my question was about Südtirol. So we have this land, this is an Italian land, but it has a really strong Austrian culture, and there is also the language, and it's pretty interesting because the objective of Austria is to probably preserve the culture, right? So, which is the solution for Austria to reach a better protection of this culture?
I think we have the solution. The solution is the autonomy of Südtirol. Italians call it Alto Adige. We call it Südtirol because historically it's a part of Tyrol. It's a long story, and you have to know that in 1946 there was a bilateral treaty between the then foreign ministers of Austria and Italy, where it was agreed that autonomous status would be given to Südtirol for the purpose of preserving their cultural and linguistic identity. I think we can be both proud, Italy and Austria, that we have now a model region in Südtirol. It's one of the richest in Italy, also former Alpine, not very affluent, and where we also believe that it is a model of how a minority issue can be tackled. It was a cumbersome process. I mean, it's decades, 46 to 1992, and actually going on to a certain degree also today. 1992, why do I say that? 1992, Austria has notified the United Nations that the dispute between Italy and Austria on Südtirol has ended. This was because there were two packages of autonomy, and the implementation took a while. And this was also, talking about EU enlargement, something which was important, because this also enabled us, by settling a bilateral issue with Italy, for us to enter the European Union 3 years later in 1995. It is now, Südtirol, as we see it, a veritable bridge between our two countries, Austria and Italy, and no longer an obstacle or a bone of contention. There's some fine-tuning to do all a while, but this is what is done by the government in Bolzano with Rome. This current government has committed itself to restore all those autonomy competences which Südtirol lost since 1992 due to decisions of the Constitutional Court, to restore that, to rectify that, so that we will get back to a level. I'm confident that this government will see it through, and as I said, this is no longer a bone of contention, but a bridge between our two countries.
Hi, I'm Eleonora, a GG2 student from Italy. After the visa scandal in 2019, which led to the collapse of the government, there were elections, and new elections should be called next year, if I'm not wrong. My question is, in your perspective, what is the future of Austria executive government, and what could be the change in the political agenda, especially with regards to the European Union relationship? Thank you.
If you look at the opinion polls currently, the far right, the Freedom Party of Austria, is ahead with about 30%. Then comes the Conservative Party, ÖVP, which is now together in the government with the Greens. This is a novel combination, Conservative and Greens in one government. I think you find it in some Länder in Germany, but not on a federal level. The Social Democrats are third in opinion polls. There is still some time until the elections, which will take place next fall. After the 5 years, we have 5 years cycles, like in Italy, parliamentary cycles. The difference between Italy and Austria is that if in Austria government collapses, it's normally connected to new elections, where in Italy the government collapses and there have been new governments within the existing parliament formed. So you have had many more governments in Italy, but we had many more elections in Italy. That is something which is interesting fact if you look at stability or not stability. So there's another year to go. The Freedom Party is a far-right party, is especially working on with the public on the migration issue. It is you could say at least EU skeptic, but it will not be able to govern alone if it were to be in the next government. So that is the one thing. And the other thing, we have a tradition that it's also possible that the parties who come out second and third form a government because they have the parliamentary majority. So I would say everything is open. We have a trend in Europe in general, tilting to the right. You've seen also the recent election results in Germany, where even in Germany, the far right Eurosceptic has gained ground. And I think this is just something we have to live with and work with.
Good morning, Ambassador. I'm Emanuele Capitini. I'm a GG student from Italy. And my question was, since Austria has always been close to the Balkans and their situation, what is your opinion on the tension rising in these days in the area recently, and especially between Serbia and Kosovo? Thank you.
I was always saying that we have three Gordian knots to solve in the Balkans. One was the name issue of Macedonia, which is now called North Macedonia after the agreement with Greece. But there we still have the issues with Bulgaria. Then we have the second one is, of course, the Kosovo-Serbia issue, and the third is Bosnia-Herzegovina. Having said that, the advancement of the other countries is also not to our liking. I think we have I always call it the double failure. The one failure is from the side of the European Union, because we are not fulfilling our promises. 20 years ago in Thessaloniki, the European Union had given a clear membership perspective to the Western Balkans. Here we are 20 years later, and where are we? Then also, if we give certain conditionality and they fulfill it, we don't necessarily keep our word. The best example was the Kosovo visa liberalization, Kosovo being the only country in the Western Balkans who still needs visa for their citizens to enter the European Union, where they fulfilled all the criteria, and then we invented some new ideas. This is the same with accession processes, which are hampered by individual countries. I mentioned the issue of Bulgaria, North Macedonia, but now there's the issue with Greece and Albania because of a mayor in Albania of the Greek minority being incarcerated, and Greece just wants to use this as a leverage. As long as we have that, we on the EU side can all fulfill our commitments. On the other hand, it's a failure also of the leadership in the Western Balkans, where we see a rise in nationalism, and this fuels also confrontations like we've seen in the north of Kosovo. I mean, this is an outrageous, there was an outrageous attack of a militant, heavily armed and trained militant group in North Kosovo. And this has to have consequences. You cannot just go to business as usual after that. We really have to solve this issue. Again, there's always two to tango, and you need both sides who would like to solve the issue, and with maximalist positions, no one will win. From Austrian point of view, but it has to be made clear that two things: we are a recognizer of Kosovo, 5 EU members are not. So this is point one. And point two, we don't need a second Republika Srpska in the north of Kosovo, which makes the country ungovernable. And that's the problem we have in Bosnia-Herzegovina, where Austria has pushed with its allies very much to get the candidate status for Bosnia-Herzegovina as well. But now we are struggling to have good arguments to say if Ukraine starts accession talks in December, or the decision is made that Ukraine can start accession talks, and Moldova, that also Bosnia-Herzegovina should have the start of accession talks. So this is not made easy, because of especially the entity of the Republika Srpska trying to block every progress of the country in their quest to show Bosnia is not working. We should have the right to secede, and this is a no-go for us Europeans.
Good morning. I'm here. I'm Rebecca Maria Serrano, and I'm from Italy. And my question is, from the Vienna terrorist attack in 2020 to today, how Austria has changed its measures against terrorism, and can the last measures adopted for Austrian borders also be a prevention to it?
The 2020 terrorist attack was interesting insofar as the perpetrator was an immigrant, Albanian origin. I think he was from North Macedonia. Then there was a policewoman confronting him who had a migration background, also Albanian, and one of the victims was also of migration background. So the this is exemplary to show that you cannot jump to conclusions that terrorism is something we import. Of course, there are. We've just seen now in France, we have seen in Belgium. There is this aspect. So there's certainly a security angle, how to tackle that, but then there is the other angle, which we call integration of our immigration communities. I mean, there's a joke that Vienna is, because of its large Serbian community, that it is the third largest town of Serbia. So we have 200 to 300,000 Serbs living in Vienna. And it is a challenge, but it can be done. You have to be, as a host society, you have to be also actively engaging the immigration communities. And if a host community rejects immigration communities, there will be a counter reaction. And therefore, this has to be dealt with. And the integration goes a lot with language. Because if we see where they're try to avoid segregation, so no quarters where there only foreign communities live. I mean, we have the advantage in Austria and Vienna, my hometown, which is the biggest magnet for immigration. You have to know that 39% of the population of Vienna, which now grew to 2 million, 39%, 2 million. The last time Vienna had 2 million inhabitants was 1910, when it was the capital of a monarchy. And it shrank to under 1.5 million, and now it's 2 million people. 39% of the Vienna population was born outside of Austria. I live in a quarter where I would say we have about that same amount of people living who are foreign born. This is a challenge, especially if they get to school, if they don't speak, in our case, German, so the language of instruction in the school system at home, because then they hit the school system and don't comprehend what it's all about just because of the language. So what Austria has introduced was an obligatory kindergarten year, which is free of charge, but obligatory, so that at least before kids hit school, they have 1 year of being immersed in German. There's talk of introducing a second kindergarten year. So hopefully we will be able to introduce that, so that you have 2 years before they hit the school. Because we have seen that very often, because of the lack of language, the kids will not follow the instruction, and then they get to secondary streams or even stop going to school and so on. So we have to create the conditions also for the immigration community to have social mobility. And to a certain degree, it worked in the past. Now we're trying to do more. We have our Minister of Justice, Alma Sadic. She's born in Bosnia-Herzegovina. We have members of parliament, like in Germany, who are of Turkish origin, Kurd origin, Palestinian origin in the Parliament of Vienna. So this is possible. It's the biggest challenge is with those who do not have an educated background. We've seen that with the recent wave of immigrants in 2015. A bulk came from Afghanistan, young men, totally uneducated, to get them into the labor market with these circumstances is very difficult. Whereas among the Syrians, the first wave of this time, they were mostly educated, and if not the first generation, the second generation is integrated.
Good morning. Hi.
Yeah.
My name is Roman. I'm from France.
From?
France.
France, yeah.
Yes. And so my question is a bit unrelated to what we said so far, but I think it's interesting nonetheless. I heard you mention in the beginning that you worked for the UN and that you're more of a field diplomat rather than a laptop diplomat. And so I wondered if you could elaborate on that, and especially on your role in establishing peace and trust and building the bridge you were talking about between two countries. Thanks.
My job as a laptop diplomat was I was a second secretary, so one of very low in our embassy in Belgrade, and I had a wonderful portfolio which was cultural, press and information, plus Kosovo political. So I got sort of what everybody else didn't want to do in the embassy. But this became a very interesting mix, because you have to imagine, these were the Milosevic years. So we were also working in the field with the media and in the field of culture with opposition institutions, opposition media. But mostly it became then Kosovo, where when I was there in the beginning of, I was starting at 97, but in the beginning of 98, the uprising began, and I, as a junior diplomat, was the one who was traveling the country, Kosovo, and meeting at a certain moment also the rebel representatives. So this is something which you normally don't do as a standard diplomat. It happened to me to be there at the right time. I was interested in Kosovo. Austria was also the only country which recognized the diploma of the underground University of Pristina. You have to imagine that in 1989, the Serbian authorities under Milosevic kicked out all the Albanians from all the public institutions. So doctors at hospitals, to university professors. The University of Pristina was also in the Albanian language. They stopped that. It was only Serbian language. So this really forced them to go underground, and they had an underground university, underground schools, something which actually also in the fascist time, the Südtirolians had. They taught their children in cellars, because the public schools did not allow the use of German, just Italian, and that the Serbs did the same. So there was it was a powder keg which exploded in 1998 with a war where heavily involved also the international community. My ambassador, Wolfgang Petric, became the EU special envoy. I was the one who knew Kosovo. I became his assistant, so I participated also in the Rambouillet and Paris conferences to solve it peacefully. It did not work out for various reasons. And then what ensued was the NATO intervention. After the NATO intervention, I returned to Kosovo, first to Belgrade and then to Kosovo, and became part of the UN mission, which also was a very interesting experience, because the UN was tasked, and never did it before, and I hope we'll never do it again, because it did quite dismally, is to administer a whole country. This is what the UN missions were never thought to do, but it was an enormous experience. And building bridges, I think that's what our job is, trying to avoid a conflict and resolve conflict. That's what our job is all about. If you do it sort of on the field, that's one issue. If you do it as an ambassador, bilateral, you try to tackle all the issues where there are frictions, and the more closer you are geographically, logically, the more interconnections and the more frictions there could be, or potential frictions. Is it traffic? In the case of Austria and Italy, it is the Brenner, the traffic, the lorry traffic through Tyrol. So these are issues we have to tackle, and we need a spirit of wanting to tackle them and not trying to confront each other.
Thank you. Amir?
Yeah.
I'm Giulia Amici, a GG2 student from Italy and Austria, and my question was about the Brenner Pass, since I wanted to ask you your opinion about the fact that Matteo Salvini accused Austria of breaking European norms of the free circulation of goods, and since the Brenner Pass doesn't allow the passage of trucks during weekends.
This is a long standing issue between Italy and Austria. We try to make clear the viewpoint from Austria. We have a more than doubling of lorry traffic over the Brenner in the last 10 years, whereas the lorry traffic via Switzerland diminished by 30%. So the one point is, because of these lorries, we're talking about 2.5 million going over the Brenner. There is a pollution, both in air, but also noise. You have to think of the specific situation of mountain valleys, where the noise of traffic actually augments if you're up on the slopes of the hill. I mean, it happened to me now, even in Rome. I went up Monte Mario, and Monte Mario, I was astonished how loud it was because of the traffic in Rome, sort of wandering up and amplifying. Why is this the case? This is the case because we believe it is because Switzerland has about 4 times as high a toll for the lorries. So there's a diversion that trucks who might actually would have the shorter route via Switzerland will go via Austria because it's just cheaper for them. So we say that 30% of the traffic over the Brenner is a diversion traffic from Switzerland. They take a detour over Austria because it's cheaper, even though through Switzerland it would be shorter. Switzerland has also a blockage for lorry traffic at night, so no trucks can go at night, as Austria has, because that's the time when people like to sleep. Yeah, and it's pretty loud. And if you look, what we want that to be on equal footing with the Swiss and even the French traverses of the Alps. In Italy, the tolls on the highways towards the Brenner are minimum 50% lower than the access roads to Switzerland. I'm just talking about Italy. So at the same time, Italy has, in our view, not done enough to put the freight traffic from trucks to train. Italy has a rate of 10% of all freight is transported by rail, 90% by trucks. In Austria and Switzerland, 2 mountainous countries, it is 35%. How can we manage to do that and Italy cannot? So this is an argument we're also using. The goal of the European Union is to get to 20%. Italy is nowhere on its way to this 20%. That would change. And we need to already start now. There are still some capacities of the current train line, because we're building a tunnel, the Brenner base tunnel, which is a long project. It will be finished in 2032. Such tunnels cost a fortune and take a long time. But this should be then a real help, because then we can divert freight traffic to the railroad even more. But for that, the logistic companies have to use the rail, and they should start with it now.
Hello. Yeah. My name is Can. I'm a Jiu-Jitsu student. I'm coming from Turkey. And my question was about the Western Balkan route. Last year, I had the chance to have an internship in the headquarters of the ICMPD in Vienna. And I studied the conflict that is happening between the Syrian border and the Turkish border. Syrians and Afghans migrating to Turkey. And my question was, it's kind of similar to my colleague's question, Emanuela. How is the increased pressure on the Western Balkan route being addressed right now? And is the conflict of people fleeing Russia's invasion of Ukraine affecting the migration routes of Balkan countries?
The latter question, not necessarily. I mean, we have a strong number of Ukrainians who have fled the Ukraine. Officially, it's 100,000. We guess of those who have the right to stay, and we don't count them normally in our. If we talk about irregular migrants, they are not. They are regular migrants with a right of stay, right to work, right to go to school, and so on. Probably 80,000 stay. Migration is increasingly being weaponized, and that case in point was the irregular migration from Belarus towards Latvia and Poland, where this was used to destabilize countries. Where the Belarusians even flew in migrants and chartered buses to the border. So using migrants as pawns in a I mean, how cynical in a chess game of geopolitical chess game. And then with dire consequences that many of these migrants died in the woods between the countries. And the Western Balkans, Turkey is a host community to many millions of refugees. And at the time, 2015, when we had the big migration crisis, the one idea was to help Turkey deal with the big migration influx. Because if you deal with them, the chance is there that they being near their home, they might return. Just logically, they haven't. This is what Turkey has to deal with, and not continue on their journey towards Europe. I mentioned the numbers of asylum seekers last year in Austria, which was higher by a third than 2015. You can ask why. Why? It also has to do that the whole system, we were talking about Schengen, doesn't work. Asylum system doesn't work. So we are a bit more thorough in registering irregular migrants. And you ask yourself, how do they come to Austria? They must have passed at least one, if not a few Schengen countries, EU and Schengen countries, to reach us. Yeah, the bulk comes then Balkan route via Hungary. And if we had border controls with Hungary, then they came through via Slovenia or Slovakia. So that's why we had border controls also now with these countries. How did we address our issue from last year? We have noticed that the highest number of irregular migrants last year, astonishingly next to Tunisians, were Indian citizens. And also from Burundi. And so we made pressure together with Hungary on Serbia, because we noticed why they're coming there. They're flying in there because there's no visa requirement. So what we got the Serbs to do is to reintroduce visa requirements for these countries. Voila, the number of asylum seekers this year has diminished by 30%. And there are no Indian citizens among them and no Tunisian among them. Having said that, we work as the Italian government on migration partnerships, which is a combination of issues. One, open up legal pathways. Two, economic cooperation and education cooperation. But three, also readmission, returns policies of those who misuse the system, who are not asylum seekers for the sake of, in the true sense of seeking refuge, safety, but for those who just look for economic opportunities. And the same discussion of integration, if they are not educated, not skilled labor, it is impossible for them to find a job. We have in Austria a shortage of skilled labor. Even Italy has a shortage of skilled labor. So we need immigration, but a certain kind of immigration. And Austria has been an immigration country since the 1960s. Turkish community in Austria is a case in point. We have a huge Turkish community, I think in 200,000 in Vienna. You might know better. You have instruments. That's not one solution to migration. Migration will always exist, also irregular migration. You just have to try to manage it. And you also have to be aware, whenever you plug a hole will somewhere open, because people, for whatever reason, they want to migrate. They want to migrate to Europe. They think, falsely, in many cases, it's the Holy Land to come, milk and honey. To a certain degree, we're taking care of them to our rather generous social system. So we will not, but the problem is that those who are refused by the asylum courts of having a right of asylum, to take them back to the countries of origin. I think that's the biggest challenge we have in Europe, apart from controlling the outer borders of the European Union. But partners like Turkey, but partners like transit countries, your destination and transit country. Tunisia is not only a transit country, it's also a destination country. So it is a multi-pronged approach you need, and you need a joint effort with partner countries like Turkey.
Hello, I'm here. My name is Stanislas. I'm a GD2 student, and I come from Switzerland.
From?
Switzerland.
Switzerland, okay.
And my question is, according to you and according to Austria's interest, does the European Union voting system needs a reform regarding sensitive matters?
Sorry, before you can answer, I just want to say that this will be the last question because of time issues, but the class is full of questions, so I don't know if you can give us a contact so that we could somehow keep in touch and the questions can be answered.
I mean, I still have time, so...
there is another event that's
okay, good.
But I don't know, there is... Maybe we can ask the organizers if we can...
Yeah, we can go. Last year we also went there for some questions, and then at 1:15 I have to go at 1:20 probably. Yeah, I mean, as I said before, with the enlargement, that's the everlasting dichotomy of the European Union, the deepening and the widening. And I think we have now agreed that we have to do both in parallel. France was so far until recently saying we have to deepen the European Union first before we can widen, meaning taking up in more member states. It is a fact that the more member states they are, it becomes more complicated. So those who were with the founding members, like Italy, it was it's easy to within 6. Yeah, already 15 was a bit more complicated, and now we're 27. For a while we were 28, and we could be 35 in the end. And you can see when we talked about the Western Balkans, I mentioned it, but also in foreign policy, in areas where we have unanimity, this could make the EU less agile or not being even able to come to a joint position. So there's a lot of talk. Where can we introduce qualified majority more than we have now? In the topic of migration, there is the qualified majority, but countries like Hungary and Poland, at least in the outgoing government, were opposed to this way of dealing with things. There's talk of how can we expand the scope of qualified majority. I mean, we don't necessarily need a change of the primary law of the European Union, because there is already now in the Treaty of Lisbon a provision, passerelle, where if the European Council decides unanimously, that's the trick, it can widen the scope of qualified majority voting to a wider area of topics. My country, Austria, we are reluctant, for example, to drop unanimity in areas of taxation. There are national interests which collide, but I think there were a lot of proposals, 90% of all the proposals which came out of the Future of Europe process can be implemented without changing the treaties. So there's scope and possibilities. It's just always a question of political will.
Sorry, again. Okay, so for the people that are going to join the optional event, you can start to move. The event is in this room. If the ambassador wants to say for other questions, we still have the place until you have time. So you can continue.
Okay.